This lesson is a continuation of Isaiah 22nd chapter. It has been about an oracle to Jerusalem. And in the verses in the last lesson, as we ended at verse 18, Shebna, who is the treasurer, is being addressed and promised that he will be tossed about like a ball, and that no matter how fancy a grave or a burial box he might have, it won't matter if his soul has gone screaming off to the wrong side of the gulf. And Shebna, this treasurer, scholars think that he is a Kenite, which means that he was a offspring of Cain, and we'll pick it up with verse 19. And I will drive thee from thy station, and from thy state shall he pull thee down. And he certainly will be pulled down. 20. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah. Eliakim means raised up by God, and Elkiah, his father's name, means God is my portion. So these persons who will come after Shebna will be representing God. 21. And I will clothe him with thy robe and strengthen him with thy girdle, and I will commit thy government unto his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. Now, this is futuristic, and this future person who will take the government may remember that the government, it will be on his shoulder. This is Jesus. 22. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. And the key of David, Jesus is an offspring of David, and that key that can open and shut, that key of David, is available to us. It's in the New Testament in the 3rd chapter of Revelation, verse 10, and it has to do with being knowledgeable, the key to David, the lineage of the true Christ. And God is talking to be the real king, who, not Shebna, but to Shebna the most important thing was money, and sometimes we are mistaught that we are to be poor old Christians, but if we have nothing, it is hard for us to bless anyone. But the point is that if we are in God's protection, if we have relied on God, as none of these people did who had those burdens, those 7 burdens we came through, if we're relying on God, we will be within the blessing. And if what we have has been gotten honestly and not through cheating or standing on the shoulders and running over persons, then it's perfectly good. And I will fasten him as a nail in a sure place, and he shall be for a glorious throne to his father's house. And even in colonial times, this nail is a peg, and pegs would be, even back in our times, if we go back a couple of centuries or so, houses had pegs inside, and things were hung on the pegs, and pegs were on the outside, and things were hung on those pegs because closets and sheds and those kinds of things were not as available as they are today. So this is a peg here on which we can hang, and we can 24, and they shall hang upon him all the glory of his father's house, the offspring and the issue, all vessels of small quantity, from the vessels of cups even to all the vessels of flagons. So this peg, this Messiah, we can hang everything on that peg, the small things and the very large things, and that peg won't come loose. 25 to complete this chapter. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, and that was when Shebna came in that day. Shall the nail that is fastened in the sure place be removed and be cut down and fall, and the burden that was upon it shall be cut off, for the Lord hath spoken it. So Shebna wasn't much of a peg. His peg fell, and he led persons astray. Everything that was hung on that peg failed and fell away. And the Messiah will never give way. That peg will sustain and hold anything that is put on it. And the meaning of this chapter to Jerusalem, they, back in the early part of the chapter, they had put 2 walls between the old pool, and they had built up walls, and they'd prepared for war, but they had trusted in what man could do, and they had not put any trust in God. And then they had old Shebna, who loved money and was the treasurer. And the whole point is sort of in verse 11 of this chapter: don't leave God out. And that peg, old Shebna, a peg that is wealth and worldly and those kinds of things, we are best not to hang our expectations and our desires and our lives on those kinds of pegs, because they will fall. And we are to put God first and to trust God. Now, chapter 22 is called the burden of Tyre, and that, again, like Jerusalem, that should be an oracle of Tyre. Tyre was a rock island, and I would point out that Ezekiel 28, Tyre, king of Tyre, is one of Satan's names, and he's a rock, but he's not a genuine rock. And this Tyre, this rock island that's out in the Mediterranean off from Sidon, and Sidon means fishery, and this area, excuse me, was an area of commerce, and the ships of Tarshish sailed out from there, and scholarly persons have discovered ancient writings on rocks in South America that would indicate that these ships traveled unbelievably far, maybe even over into this side of the earth. The burden of Tyre: how ye ships of Tarshish were is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in from the land of Chitin. It is revealed unto them. And this Chiton is Cyprus, and of course that is an island off of Greece. And that is Bruisers is the uh, in the elect. In other words, this place was flattened, it was bruised, and it is flattened today. There's nothing where this rock island was as a flourishing place of commerce is gone. 2. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished, and they have supplied, and they have been very much involved in making a lot of money in commercial merchandising by shipping. 3. And by great waters, the seed of Sahor, the harvest of the river, is her revenue, and she is a mart of nations. She's the marketplace. And that word Sahor, that's the Nile. And they were busy hauling grain for Egypt. And 4, that Zidon is a mother city. Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, or bring forth children. And that means that the growth, it's not going to have any growth. 5. At that report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. They're going to be saddened by the report coming out of Tyre. 6. Pass ye over to Tarshish, howl ye inhabitants of the isle. They will be weeping because they are going to be taken over. 7. It is your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days. Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. No matter how famous and how long the history, when they turn away from God, their own feet carry them to their destruction. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, where merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth? Oh, it was a kingmaker, and the leaders were corrupt, and today we have kingmakers and that kind of thing still happening. The Lord of hosts hath purposed it to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the earth. And that word stain is pollute. And this is a culture that did not honor God. It's like Shebna in Jerusalem. They were interested in money and merchandise. And verse 10. Pass through thy land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more strength. That all that power is gone. And this was predicted through Isaiah, and it happened. As we get into this chapter, we will find out. 11. He stretched out his hand over the sea. He shook the kingdoms. The Lord hath given a commandment against the merchant city to destroy the strongholds thereof. And it's going to be destroyed. Now, Nebuchadnezzar came in to take Tyre, but they were able to send some ambassadors out there and to buy Nebuchadnezzar's promise to not bother them, and that's historical and can be documented. 12. And he said, Thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin daughter of Zidon. Arise, pass over to Chittim, again, that is Cyprus. There also shalt thou have no rest at all, and no peace. 13. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans, this people was not till the Assyrian founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness. They set up the towers thereof, they raised up the palaces thereof, and he brought it to ruin. Now, the Chaldeans, of course, is Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar, as we know, did take Judah, but he did not take Tyre because they were able to give him enough money that he left them alone. 14. Howl, you ships of Tarshish, for your strength is laid waste. Why? The port's gone. When you don't have a port, you can't do much shipping. 15. And it shall come to pass that in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years according to the days of one king. After the end of 70 years shall Tyre sing as a harlot. And this is historical. It did come to pass. Nebuchadnezzar took Judah in the year 496 BC, and 70 years later, in 426 BC, Cyrus, who was named by God, one of those persons in the Bible who was named by God before his birth, and he would not take the mainland of Tyre. And Tyre was not taken until Alexander the Great moved out into that part of the world conquering. And here's how he took Tyre. He went to Zidon and he pushed dirt and he made a road out to Tyre, to that rock island, and it was Alexander the Great. It was his move as a conqueror who took this rock island. Now we know that Alexander the Great and the Greek invasion of every part almost of the known world affected the Holy Land. In Jesus's time, we had Hellenists; those were Greeks. We had Greeks living in the Holy Land. In fact, Paul, his father was a Greek, and he could speak straight Greek. His mother was Hebrew, and he had been schooled as a Pharisee. So you can see that Alexander the Great had a great deal of power. In fact, one of the kings late in the time before the Romans took, they had a king who was a Greek, and he was taken over by the Maccabees, and then the Maccabees were taken over in 63 AD, BC by the Romans, who were in power at the time of Jesus. A little bit of history there, but it's important to understand how these conquerors changed the world and changed populations. They are, that's those 70 years. 16. Take a harp, go about the city, thou harlot that has been forgotten. Make sweet melody, sing many songs that thou mayest be remembered. It's said that she would be singing like a harlot, and a harlot, we always have that adultery illusion in the Bible for those who turn away from God. Christ expects a virgin bride when he returns and not an adulterer. So they're advertising, and this was a perfect prediction for Tyre made by Isaiah long before it happened, and it did happen exactly that the rock was no more, and it is today no more. And this is a lesson to us that prophecies and predictions, especially futuristic predictions, God has laid them out, and they will come to pass exactly as they are predicted. 17. And it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornications with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And the Lord visit and the cry for help, and that told them that Cyrus was on the way, but Cyrus didn't take them, and they did not understand the truth. 18. And her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to the Lord. It shall not be treasured nor laid up, for her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before the Lord to eat sufficiently and have durable clothing. Now, pay attention to that verse. Who is it that will have the clothing they need and will have what they need to eat? It's those who will put their trust in God. And knowledge here, knowledge is wonderful if it comes from God. Remember what Solomon said. He said that the beginning of wisdom is the reverence for God. And when we revere God, we will be worshipful, and we will want to know what He has said. And this is how to be pleasing to God. These two chapters are the oracle to Jerusalem and the oracle to Tyre, are wonderful lessons for us, and we are to hang our souls and ourselves on that peg. The 24th chapter, we will venture into it a little bit. It is called the Apocalypse of Isaiah, and you can almost know the book of Revelation from reading this chapter. And let us begin to get into it. Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. This is futuristic. It's that final shaking. And I want to point out that that word baka, empty in the Hebrew is baka. And think about upside down, think about a big old jug of water, and you turn it upside down and the water runs out, and it'll say baka, baka, baka. And we will stop there and continue this part in the next lesson. This has been an outreach of the United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri.